I attended Canterbury School for 4 years, a prep school in New Milford, Connecticut, where I was president of the class, editor of the school newspaper, and captain of the hockey team. After after Canterbury School, I went to Holy Cross College in Worcester, Massachusetts, and my junior year, the day after Pearl Harbor, 30 of us went to the Worcester Post Office to enlist in the V7 program. I failed the physical because of hypertension. I went home for Christmas in December of 41. I went to my family physician, who tested my heart and said there was no problem, it was just anxiety and over anticipation. In February of 42, there was a notice on the bulletin board that they were offering direct commissions to special categories, mainly in the sciences and engineering, but at the bottom was business administration, which was my degree. I went to Boston and was interviewed and took the physical, passed the physical, and in April of 42 received a direct commission called DVP, the P being probationary, subject to my getting my diploma at the end of my senior year. We accelerated, and I got my diploma in December of 42. Having received my commission, we had an ROTC unit, so I went to Commander Wheeler and said, I have this commission and I have the summer off, what do you suggest I do? He said, write a letter to 3rd Naval District advising them of your availability. A letter came back from 3rd Naval District that if I had a period of more than 60 days, I should report to the 3rd Naval District for further assignment. I came home that June, bought my uniforms at an Army and Navy store, and no training other than in my youth. I was a sailor, and I'd also taken 2 courses in navigation. I was reported to the 3rd Naval District, and they sent me to the section base in Tompkinsville, Long Island, Staten Island. And the section base had a group of 6 YMSs, small 138-foot minesweepers. When I reported the executive officer, there was an officer standing behind him, and when the exec looked at my orders, he turned around to the man behind him and said, he's green, but he's yours. The 3rd officer of the YMS 20 was AWOL, and so 3 o'clock that afternoon, I got underway as the 3rd officer and stood the mid-watch with the captain in the ready berth on the flying bridge. And we were patrolling at night for U-boats, and U-boats have been operating with impunity on the East Coast from Boston down to Florida. Our role was to observe them and then report their presence to 3rd Naval District. We had limited patrol forces at that time and minimal convoys, escorts. During the day, we would sweep for magnetic mines which were being laid by German submarines off the approaches to New York. We would go out to sea for 10 or 15 miles until we got to deeper water. The magnetic sweep consists of 2 600-foot cables drawn astern, a generator sending an electrical pulse at the end of each cable was a contact, and there'd be a magnetic surge in one direction for plus and another direction for minus. Every ship has a magnetic signature, and they use degaussing, which is an electrical band around the ship to reduce its magnetic signature. But the mine has a dip needle, and when the ship goes by, a merchant ship, even with degaussing, can cause that dip needle to drop, hits a detonator that blows up 800 pounds of TNT, and thus sinking the vessel. That after the summer of 42, I transferred. During the summer of 42, I transferred from the YMS 20 to the YMS 44 and continued in the same venue. I went back to college in September. I got my degree in end of December and had put in an application for further duty after I was released from duty on the YMS for mine warfare school. So I then, in March of 1942, I went to mine warfare school in Yorktown, Virginia, for a period of 8 weeks, at which time we learned the processes of magnetic sweeping and contact mine sweeping, which consists of a wire being drawn astern out at an angle of about 40 degrees, 600, 700 feet, with a flag attached to a float's attached to a paravane that carries it out to the angle desired. On the stern is a depressor that's attached to the sweep wire that draws the sweep wire down to the depth you want to sweep, which is generally anywhere from 20 to 16 feet. When you're sweeping, the cable, the mine is anchored at the bottom of the sea, and the mine is up at 16 feet, and the wire is below that. The cable that's attached to the mine chafes along the serrated wire, weakens the links of the chain, and every 15 feet was an a cutter with a sharp knife. So when the sweep cable, when the cable for the mine hit the cutter, it would sever the chain. The mine, because it had positive buoyancy, would then rise to the surface. And a mine destruction vessel, generally a PC, which was a 165-foot patrol boat, would follow astern of the sweep and destroy the mine with 20 millimeter machine gun fire. After mine warfare school, I waited for further orders and was ordered to the Pacific. I went to San Francisco, and on a Moore McCormick C-3 freighter with about 1,000 troops, got underway for Noumea, New Caledonia, in the Society Islands in the Pacific, South Pacific. When I got on board the transport, a friend of mine saw my name on the list that I was going on the Mormac ship, and I was appointed officer of troops, which meant that I had to supervise their feeding. A Marine did it one day, a Navy man, which was me, did it the next day, and an Army officer did it the last day. It was interesting in that I knew it was a success when I had as many men coming out of the mess hall, down in the mess hall of the freighter, as were going down the stairs. We arrived in Fiji, and because of my work as an officer of troops, I was able to go ashore. The only three officers on board that were able to go ashore, which is most interesting to see the huge Fijians in their kava-kavas, which are skirts directing traffic in the British fashion. We arrived in Noumea, New Caledonia. and awaited orders. It was interesting. I went to Mass in the cathedral in Noumea and bumped into a schoolmate of mine from Canterbury School, Dan Mooney. I was then given orders to join the USS Skylark, and in the whaleboat going to the Skylark, a lieutenant commander, George M. Estep, who was to be the relieving commanding officer, was also in the boat. So here was the young dog-faced ensign with the prospective commanding officer. And we hit it off right away. And we got underway to Sasebo, Japan from Pearl Harbor. And when we arrived in Sasebo, George Estep relieved Lieutenant Commander Connors. And I was supply officer, minesweeping officer, and assistant navigator, and also operated the Hedgehog firing system when we were attacking a submarine. We took departure from Noumea, New Caledonia, escorting convoys to Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal had been secured, but nonetheless the troops had to be supplied, so we did 3 or 4 trips up from Noumea to Guadalcanal. Then they moved the naval base from Noumea and all the supply systems to Espiritu Santo, which was an islands below Rendova, Villa La Vella, and Bougainville. And I was involved in supporting the invasions of those particular areas. We were not minesweeping. YMSs were doing that. I was on an AM, which had 8 officers, 96 men. And we finished our work in that area, and by that time the invasions of Eniwetok and Kwajalein in the Central Pacific had occurred. And we went to a place called Ulithi and was involved in the invasion of Guam. After the invasion of Guam, the Skylark headed back for 60 days of availability in Stockton, California for overhaul, for putting in new 40 millimeter Bofors in tubs and a new type of acoustic hammer. The acoustic mines we had in the bow of the ship, we had a pneumatic hammer that would send out a sonic signal that could affect acoustic mines. Microphone in the mine would pick up the sound. The sound would be transferred to electrical energy and blow up the mine. So at times the Germans would lay a mixed field with contact mines, magnetic mines, and acoustics. So the sweepers had to be suitable and available to attack all 3 systems at the same time. We returned after our overhaul to Ulithi, which was a major center for the invasion of Okinawa. There were 1,500 ships involved. We arrived off Okinawa 3 days before the invasion and began sweeping off the Hagushi beaches, a mile off the beach. We were on the tail end of 8 minesweepers. The Revenge was the leading sweep, and we were the last sweep. We made a pass through the minefield, sweeping mines, We did what is known as a Corpin 1-8, all ships turning simultaneously 180 degrees, so that we were then the lead ship going into the field. Halfway down the field, we hit a mine, drifted into a second mine. We lost the forward engine room. All the men were killed. Captain ordered abandon ship. I released a life raft and jumped in the water. The captain jumped in and got in a life raft with me, and we had several badly burned boys that we got out of the water. And a whaleboat from the Toland, a DMS, which was a destroyer minesweeper, picked us up. We were then transferred to the WWII, a transport ship located in Karamaretto, an island off Okinawa. At that time, the Japanese were attacking what was known as our inner and outer screen of destroyers and destroyer escorts that would alert aircraft that the Zeros were coming in. But they would come in so fast that we were losing 1 or 2 destroyers and destroyer escorts a day. It was the worst defeat in the Navy, in the history of the Navy, in the history of naval warfare. When the WWII filled up with survivors from all these sunken ships, we went back to Pearl Harbor and then to San Francisco. I was given 30 days survivor's leave. I went home to Forest Hills. Then I was reassigned to Mine Warfare School for a refresher course. In August the 9th of 45, prior to that, we had dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the Japanese sued for peace. The comment when we were at Mine Warfare School, who would be involved in the post-war sweeping? I raised my hand and I said, them's most qualified. You, me. So I received my orders to go to Pearl Harbor and join the Oracle AM 103. I joined the Oracle as minesweeping officer, navigator, and on the firing device for hedgehogs, along with the prospective commanding officer, George Corson. George Corson relieved the captain, and I became executive officer at age 24. We took departure from Pearl Harbor to Keeling, which is in the northern tip of Taiwan, or I still call it Formosa, for further assignment to sweep of the Formosa Straits. The Japanese had laid 10,000 mines in the straits, but we were fortunate in that the mines had been there so long, and that the monsoons that periodically came twice a year in the straits, and the straits were very shallow, would cause a sashaying of the mines back and forth, so that the cables broke and the mines became drifters all over the world as the currents would take them. And an amazing number of ships after the war was over were sunk by floaters of that type. After 3 weeks of sweeping in the Formosa Straits, we completed the sweep by the lead minesweeper with both sweep gears out and 4 minesweepers on either side, port and starboard, with their port gear and starboard gear out, making a large V, and I forget how many square miles, clear channel we met, but we didn't find any mines. There was a small island off Formosa that the British were located, and they would come out in the morning at civilized hour of 9 o'clock. We got underway at first light and secured at darkness, and then anchored in the Formosa Straits while they went back into their haven, and they would secure tea time at 4 o'clock. The trip to Shanghai was interesting because as we approached the estuary of the Yangtze River, I had the con. We went up the Yangtze, anchored at night. The next morning got underway in column. We were last ship in the column going up, and off the Bund, which is the major waterfront center and where the international settlement is located in downtown Shanghai. We were assigned to moor across the river in a place called the Wangpu Navigation Company's docks. When I had the con, I told the captain, I said, "Captain, I can't hold station because of the currents sweeping me in, so I'm going to do 360s in concentric circles, still staying with the fleet." So he said, "Fine." So then he took over and made the landing, and we were the outboard ship in a nest of 4 ships, and ahead of us on this pier were 4 more sweeps. It was interesting going ashore. I went ashore with the chief engineer who had been there before the war on the sister ship of the Panay that had been hit by the Japanese when the Japanese had attacked China. In the course of going ashore, I met a white Russian girl by the name of Zoya Kuznetsova. So she became my companion for the time that we were in Shanghai. We then received our orders to go back to Pearl Harbor and then to San Diego, where we put the ship in mothballs. When the ship was put in mothballs, it was in such condition that it could be gotten ready to be underway in case of emergencies in 2 weeks. Mothballs being coverings on all the armament, but the supplies of, other than food, for medical and spare parts, whatnot, was still intact. The captain lived in San Francisco, and he and I got along very well, so I told him I would take all his weekend duties so he could be home with his family. And the quid pro quo, if he'd get me out of the Navy 30 days earlier. I was shy a couple of points, so, which he agreed to. So in February of '46, I left San Diego, flew home, reported to 90 Church Street, and received my naval discharge. After that, I attended Columbia Law School, but I didn't complete my law studies. Went into a family business and left the family business and joined with my wife and her father, and we operated an 18th century interior design operation called the Old Colony Shop, and we were known as a Williamsburg interior design shop. 1985, I reached 65. We purchased a house in Essex, Connecticut, and moved into a house on Book Hill Road in 1986. in 2000. We sold the house in Brook Hill Road and purchased a condominium at Heritage Cove, where we're now speaking. And that concludes my verbal oral history. Thank you.
Interesting. Let me ask you a few questions when you were talking about the sweeping operations and
Yes.
losing a ship. How frequently, do you have any statistics on how frequently some of these ships were lost?
Say again?
Do you have any statistics on how frequently some of the ships were lost? Some of the minesweepers?
I don't have any knowledge, but I'm sure there must have been at least 50 during, particularly in the invasion of Normandy and in the Pacific.
Also, describe what a hedgehog is.
A hedgehog is a rocket that's mounted forward of the pilot house and aft of the 3-inch 50 gun that was on the bow, or not the bow, but aft of the forecastle. I had a firing device, and we also had an indicator. So when sonar, here's a submarine, and so we made contact. So we would make an angled approach to get within 500 yards of the submarine. Sonar would be pinging on it all the time. The device that I was on had a dash, or had a pointer that would keep bringing, I'd say, 1,000 yards, 800, 600, 500, stand by to fire. The hedgehog would then send a pattern in the area where the submarine was and hit the submarine and blow it up.
Another interesting issue is when you were on shipboard, how did you keep touch with your family? Were you able to do that at all?
No.
You were out of touch with your family for long periods of time?
Long periods of time. I would occasionally write letters, but our mail, because we were on these convoys all the time, didn't catch up with us very often.
What did you do for entertainment on ships?
Pardon me?
Was there any entertainment on shipboard?
Yes, we had movies on the fantail at night when we were at anchor. And I spoke to the captain and said we were off, where was it? I guess it was off Bougainville. And we were going out 3 or 4 miles, then doing an anti-submarine patrol and doing 180 degrees and come back. So there were 6 vessels going back and forth, sending out sonar signals to see if any Japanese submarines were hovering nearby. So I said to the captain, on Fridays I'd like to have a happy hour. Ship's company has to be in fresh dungarees, white hats squared away, and each man will get 2 cans of beer, because we carried beer on board. It's against naval regs to serve alcoholic beverages, and the recreation party then would go ashore with baseball gloves and bats and a couple of cases of beer. So the captain agreed. And it was interesting how the morale would be boosted up by getting into fresh clothes, having a couple of beers, and it just broke the routine up pretty well.
One last question. When you had shore duty, or when you were on shore, did you have any, whether it was in Fiji or Japan, any
The only shore duty?
no, as far as shore leave or whatever, did you have any exposure to the locals, whether in Fiji or Japan? to local people? No contact?
No contact because I was at Mine Warfare School in Yorktown, Virginia,
Mhm.
and Yorktown was a very small place, and but I had no contact.
Well, I want to thank you for your service, and I want to thank you for taking the time to interview us today, and we appreciate everything you did for our country.
Thank you very much.